You call it life, but most days you are only completing a script. You call it fate, when in truth you are simply reacting. And you call it lack of control, when what is missing is inner rule. The question you avoid is old and plain. What kind of life is worth living? The most common answer today looks like a race, not an experience. Life becomes a checklist. Study, work, prove yourself, repeat. Then marriage, then children, then more work, then retirement, and if there is anything left, perhaps you finally live. That model does not ask for presence, it demands performance. And performance never declares an end, it only raises the target. But real life does not respect targets. It interrupts, it changes direction, it takes, it delays, it surprises. That is why this question returns in every century, not because people are profound, but because instability is permanent. To understand why a philosophy of inner control survived for so long, we need to go back about 2,300 years, not to romanticize the past, but to see the origin without softening it. Athens, ancient Greece, a public world where people bought and sold, argued and competed, displayed status and opinion, a place built for noise and friction. And inside that noise there was a corridor of columns known as the painted stoa. There, a man began training a kind of calm that did not depend on luck. His name was Zeno of Citium, and the story often told about the birth of Stoicism does not begin with triumph, it begins with loss. Zeno was a merchant. He had wealth and stability, until a voyage ended in a storm. What was mine became water and wreckage. What remained was only one thing, his life. Many people, after a shock like that, tried to rebuild the same fortress. Zeno chose something else. He tried to rebuild the mind that kept demanding a fortress. That is where Stoicism took shape, as a discipline that uses reason against the tyranny of impulse. Not to become numb, but to stop being dragged. Not to deny emotion, but to prevent emotion from giving orders. A common mistake is to treat Stoic as cold. The old target was different, to free the mind from passions in the sense of violent inner states that seize judgment and force action. It was not an argument for a dead heart, it was an argument for a governed one. And how do you reach that? By separating what depends on you from what does not. This is the painful part, because it cuts pride. It forces you to admit that most of what happens will never answer to your wishes. Health, time, reputation, weather, other people's choices, losses, accidents, change. The world does not consult you, it proceeds. So the Stoic trains a specific focus. What is under your rule is your judgment, your choice, your response. An event arrives. The meaning is what you attach. If you want the core in one line, it is this: you do not need to command the world to be responsible for yourself. To support that, Stoicism was built as a structure with three parts: ethics, logic, and physics. Do not read those words in the modern sense. They were a survival architecture for the mind. Ethics was how to act. Logic was how to think without contradiction. Physics was what kind of universe you are trying to face with your desires. What they claimed about the universe was severe. There is an order that does not revolve around your preferences. Things unfold in chains of cause and effect. The present comes from the past. Much is unavoidable. That could sound like a prison. To them, it could also be relief. Because when you stop demanding that reality be personal, you suffer less from reality being impersonal. This view also cuts a modern addiction, the fantasy that everything should go your way. It won't, and insisting on it produces a lifetime of inner protest. From there, the question changes: if I do not command events, what do I do with my life? The Stoic answer is not applause, it is stability. It is fulfillment grounded in virtue, not constant pleasure, but steadiness, not excitement, but coherence, a character that does not change owners with every headline. They organized that into four virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. Wisdom, seeing what happens clearly without drama. Justice, dealing with people without surrendering to spite or rashness. Courage, enduring what must be endured and fearing what degrades character. Moderation, keeping desire in its proper place, choosing simplicity, refusing slavery to excess. These virtues stand together. If you claim courage without justice, you get brutality. If you claim moderation without wisdom, you get fear in disguise. The aim is unity, a mind that decides with firmness, not fever. This leads to another uncomfortable idea. Many things people worship or fear are indifferent in themselves. Beauty, strength, fame, wealth, and their opposites do not carry automatic moral value. They can be used well or badly. They can help or hinder, but they do not decide who you are. Your use of them does. This does not mean pretending pain doesn't hurt. It means refusing to turn pain into compulsory collapse. It does not mean passivity. It means knowing where to act and where to accept. You cannot control illness, but you can make sensible choices while you are well. You cannot control whether someone praises you or insults you, but you can decide whether anger will rule you. You cannot control loss, but you can refuse to dissolve inwardly. Everything that comes to you is on loan, including life itself. Recognizing that changes how you live. You stop treating the world as property and start treating it as passage. You can have honor without vanity. You can fall without becoming a failure. You don't need victory outside to avoid defeat inside. Now place this philosophy into a modern moment, small and real. You open your phone and see a short message, "We need to talk." Nothing has happened yet, but your mind races to the worst conclusion. Your body reacts before the facts exist, and you realize the first impact was not reality, it was your judgment. It's like a smoke alarm set too sensitive. It sounds before there is a fire. Neuroscience shows that typically you interpret first, the brain triggers a response, and emotion follows. That's why the Stoic target is not to fight emotion once it owns the body. It's to watch the interpretation before it becomes a verdict. This is the difference between practice and pose. A Stoic is not someone who feels nothing. A Stoic is someone who refuses to obey the first impulse. Over time, this discipline left its Greek roots and found a harsher environment where it became even more practical. Rome. There, what could be theory became daily equipment because the cost of error was real. That's why the best-known name is not a lecturer in a quiet room, but a man surrounded by duty, conflict, illness, instability, and death, Marcus Aurelius. He did not write to impress others, he wrote to keep himself from drifting. His notes have the tone of someone who knows external power does not protect against internal chaos. He lived with war, pressure, irreversible decisions, and still returned to one plain idea. What knocks you down is not the event itself, but the judgment you make about it. This also explains why the Stoic does not sell better days as a condition for living well. That would make your well-being depend on the world, and the world signs no contract. Instead, the Stoic treats the worst as possible and prepares, not from pessimism, but from clarity. When you stop flattering yourself with illusions, you stop being shocked by what was always plausible. Nothing tests this more than death. For the Stoics, it was not a morbid obsession, it was a measure. Death makes life fragile, and precisely for that reason, weighty. It cuts the fantasy that later is guaranteed. People act incoherently. They claim they want to live, yet they postpone living as if they were immortal. They only recognize fragility after losing something, and only then behave like mortals. Life does not have to be short. We make it short when we pour our best attention into what we cannot control, as if that were meaning. So the opening question returns sharper. What kind of life is worth living? A life spent chasing scripts, approval, and impossible control? Or a life in which you govern the one territory that is truly yours, your judgment? Stoicism was built in a world far from ours in politics, economy, and technology.
But the problem is the same: the mind trying to command what will not obey and breaking itself in the attempt. The remedy is still current: accept the course of events and choose the course of character. That is why Marcus Aurelius still matters as an axis. He points inward when everything pulls outward, not to soothe you, but to hold you responsible. Write, "I pause before I judge," today.